My name is Kayla, and at 28 years old, I never thought I'd be treated like an outsider in the family home I grew up in. That dinner hit hardest when my usual seat was handed over to his new wife. Mom stared right at me and said it plain, "You don't belong here anymore. Your place is under the floor." I stood up fighting the sting, ready to walk out without a word, until Grandma grabbed my arm, pulled me close, and whispered 5 words that flipped everything. If you're watching this from New York, Florida, or anywhere else dealing with family tension, hit like and subscribe now, because the twist that followed shattered our family forever and exposed truths no one saw coming. That dinner wasn't the first time I felt pushed out. The real sting came a year ago. I'd been working as a digital marketing consultant in Miami building campaigns for tourism boards. I posted a pitch on LinkedIn, a bold idea for a coastal travel startup blending ecotourism with social media buzz. It got traction with colleagues commenting and sharing. Then Cody swooped in. My brother, 3 years younger, had just launched his own startup in New York. Without a word to me, he took my concept, repackaged it, and pitched it to his investors. Next thing I knew, his company landed a major deal, and my parents were all over Facebook gushing about his genius vision. Not once did they mention it was my idea. When I called Cody out, he laughed it off, just business sis, and Mom backed him up, saying I was too sensitive about sharing. That betrayal pushed me further from Rye. At 18, I'd already left for the University of Florida, craving distance from the constant comparisons. Miami became my home after graduation. I built a career crafting campaigns for beach resorts and eco tours, earning enough to afford a small condo with a view of Biscayne Bay. My salary, about $60,000 starting out now, closer to $120,000, gave me freedom. I thrived working with clients who valued my creativity, surrounded by friends who didn't measure me against someone else. But every trip back to Rye reminded me I was still the odd one out. Mom would roll her eyes when I talked about my job. Marketing. That's just playing with pictures online, she'd say, while Dad nodded along, more interested in Cody's latest startup pitch. Cody stayed close, living just 15 minutes away in a sleek new house he bought with his wife, Amber. He followed the path my parents approved, business degree, marriage, settling near home. They attended every event of his, from engagement parties to ribbon cuttings for his startup. Me, I was lucky if they remembered my birthday. The only one who seemed to get me was Grandma Mary. She'd moved into the guest cottage on our property after Grandpa passed 5 years ago. Mary was sharp, a retired school teacher who'd built a life on her own terms. During my rare visits, she'd pull me aside on the patio, her eyes bright with interest. "Tell me about those Miami campaigns," she'd say, sipping tea, genuinely curious about my work. "Your grandpa would have loved your fire, Kayla." Those talks kept me grounded, a reminder someone in the family saw me for me. Then came the social media fallout. After Cody's stunt, I tried to confront my parents. I flew to Rye for a weekend, sat them down in the living room with its ocean view windows, and explained how he'd used my idea. Dad barely looked up from his phone. "Cody's just making the most of opportunities," he said. Mom was worse. "Kayla, you're in Miami living your little beach life. Cody's building a legacy here. Stop being so petty." Their words cut deep like salt in a wound. Even Aunt Andrea, Mom's younger sister, who sometimes visited, seemed to side with them, saying I should let it go for family harmony. I left that weekend vowing to keep my distance. I focused on my Miami life, client meetings, late-night brainstorming sessions, jogs along the beach. My condo, bought with my own savings, became my sanctuary. I stopped calling home as often, sticking to quick texts for holidays. Grandma Mary was the exception. We'd talk weekly, her voice warm over the phone, asking about my latest projects or sharing stories about her teaching days. She never pushed, but I could sense she knew how much I was hurting. That's why the call for the family dinner caught me off guard. It came last spring out of nowhere from Mom. Her voice was oddly insistent, not her usual dismissive tone. She wanted me in Rye for a special evening with no explanation. Something about it felt off, but a flicker of hope made me agree. Maybe they'd finally see my side. Maybe this was a chance to bridge the gap. I rearranged my schedule, booked a flight from Miami, and headed back to the house by the Sound, not knowing it would change everything. Then I met Amber. My brother's new wife swept into our family like she'd been born to it. The first time I met her was at a barbecue in Rye, her blonde hair tied back, wearing a tailored sundress and carrying a tray of homemade brownies. Mom practically glowed, patting her arm. "Amber, these are divine." "Kayla, you should learn to bake like this," she said, glancing at me with that familiar look of disappointment. I forced a smile, ignoring the jab, but Amber's eyes flicked to me, sharp and calculating, before she grinned. "Oh, I'd love to teach you, Kayla. Miami must not leave much time for home skills. That set the tone." Amber had a knack for subtle digs, always wrapped in sweetness. After she and Cody got married, our family dynamic shifted hard. The house in Rye, with its ocean breeze and creaking hardwood floors, used to be neutral ground. Now it was Amber's stage. Mom would call her for menu ideas for Sunday dinners. Dad would ask her advice on his small real estate firm's investments, as if I hadn't spent years studying market trends. Cody just sat there basking in her glow like she was the sun and I was some distant planet. My place at the table, always next to Dad, was given to Amber without a word. My childhood bedroom, where I'd spent hours sketching campaign ideas, was turned into her work nook for her side hustle selling luxury candles. My old journals and trophies got shoved into a closet. I tried to fit in. During one visit, I brought a bottle of Florida wine, thinking it'd spark a conversation about my life in Miami. Dad took one sip and called it too fruity for a real dinner. When I offered to cook a seafood dish from a local Miami market, Mom hovered, then took over, adding cream to my light recipe, saying Amber prefers richer flavors. Behind my back, I heard through a cousin that Amber called me the Miami Dreamer, mocking my marketing job as posting selfies for tourists. To my face, she'd smile and say things like, "Your beach vibe is so bold, Kayla." I could never dress that relaxed for family. Each comment chipped away at me, designed to make me feel small, while she played the perfect daughter-in-law. Cody, who used to be my partner in crime, changed too. Growing up, he'd always had my back, whether we were sneaking ice cream or prank-calling neighbors. But now he echoed Amber's lines. During a rare call, he said, "Kayla, maybe it's time to move back to New York. Dad could hook you up with a steady job. Amber thinks you're wasting your talent out there." I swallowed my hurt. "I'm a senior consultant, Cody. I just landed a campaign for a major resort chain." His response was a half-hearted, "That's cool, but Amber's worried you're too isolated." It hit me then he wasn't seeing me anymore, just Amber's version of me. I tried talking to Mom and Dad about it during a visit last fall. While Mom was arranging flowers for a neighborhood party, I said I feel like I'm invisible since Cody married Amber. She set down her shears, exasperated. "Kayla, you chose to run off to Miami and chase your little dreams. Amber's here, building a life with Cody, giving us a future. What are you contributing besides complaints?" Her words burned. Dad didn't even look up from his laptop, just muttered, "Don't stir up trouble." I left that day, booking an earlier flight back to Miami, my suitcase heavier than when I'd arrived. After that, I pulled back. I skipped Thanksgiving, blaming a big project deadline. I sent Christmas gifts by mail, a scarf for Mom, a book on New York history for Dad, a candle for Cody and Amber, hoping they'd see the irony. My life in Miami grew fuller. I led campaigns that won industry awards, bought a bigger condo with my savings about $200,000 down. My friends in Miami, designers, writers, surfers, became my chosen family, celebrating my wins without judgment. But the distance from Rye felt like a scar that wouldn't heal. Grandma Mary was my only tether, her weekly calls a lifeline. "You're doing big things, Kayla," she'd say. "Don't let them dim your light." When Mom called about the dinner, I hesitated. Her voice was different, almost pleading, not the usual guilt trip. "We need you here, Kayla. It's important. No holidays, no birthdays, just a random spring evening." Against my better judgment, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe they wanted to fix things. I rearranged my client meetings, spent a small fortune on a last-minute flight, and packed gifts: a bottle of aged rum for Dad, a silk shawl for Mom, a vintage map of Rye for Grandma. As my plane landed at JFK, I braced myself for whatever awaited in that house by the sound, never expecting it would turn my world upside down. The call came on a Tuesday. Mom's voice crackled through my phone, unusually soft, almost pleading. "Kayla, we're having a family dinner this Saturday in Rye. It's important you're here. No birthdays, no holidays, just a random spring evening." I sat in my Miami condo staring out at the palm trees swaying against the sunset and felt a knot in my stomach. "What's the occasion, Mom?" I asked, expecting her usual vague guilt trip. "Just come, please. It's been too long." Her tone wasn't the sharp edge I was used to, and that threw me. Against my better judgment, a small part of me hoped this might be a chance to mend things, to finally be seen. I pushed back a client presentation, booked a red-eye flight from Miami to JFK, and started packing. I spent hours picking out gifts, wanting to show I was trying. For Dad, I chose a bottle of aged rum, the kind he'd sip at his real estate firm's parties. For Mom, a silk shawl in her favorite navy blue handwoven from a Miami artisan market. For Grandma Mary, I found a vintage compass, a nod to her stories of navigating life as a young teacher. For Cody and Amber, I picked a sleek serving tray from their wedding registry they hadn't gotten. I spent nearly $500 hoping these would spark some warmth, maybe even a conversation about my life in Miami. But deep down, I braced for the usual dismissal. The night before my flight, Grandma Mary called. Her voice, warm but firm, cut through my nerves. "Kayla, I hear you're coming for the dinner." I smiled, picturing her in the guest cottage by the sound, her tea kettle whistling. "Yeah, Grandma, but Mom didn't say why." "What's going on?" There was a pause long enough to make me uneasy. "They want it to be a surprise," she said carefully. "But listen, promise me you'll stay through the evening no matter how tough it gets." "Can you do that?" Her words sent a chill through me. "Grandma, you're worrying me. Is everything okay?" She chuckled softly. "Nothing to fear, just an old lady asking you to trust me. Stay until the end, Kayla. Promise." I agreed, curiosity burning, but her tone held something heavier, like she knew more than she was letting on. I landed at JFK late Friday, the New York chill hitting me as I stepped off the plane. The taxi ride to Rye felt like stepping back in time. The house by the Long Island Sound stood as it always had, white colonial salt-weathered shutters, the lawn clipped to Mom's exact standards. I remembered summer nights chasing crabs on the nearby beach, Cody trailing behind me, giggling. Now those memories felt distant, overshadowed by the tension that had grown between us. I took a deep breath, clutching my suitcase and the bag of gifts, and walked up the stone path. Mom opened the door before I could knock her smile tight but polite. "Kayla, you made it." She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp and familiar. "Flight okay?" I nodded, stepping into the foyer. The same crystal chandelier hung above the same polished wood floors, creaked underfoot. "Everyone's in the living room," she said, giving my dress a quick glance. "That's festive." It was the closest she'd come to a compliment, and I clung to it even if it felt hollow. Laughter spilled from the living room as I followed her. Dad was at the bar cart pouring whiskey. Cody lounged on the couch, his arm around Amber, their heads close, in quiet conversation. Aunt Andrea sat nearby, flipping through a magazine. Only Grandma Mary looked up when I walked in, her face breaking into a warm smile. "There's my girl," she said, standing slowly from her armchair, her cane tapping the floor. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Remember your promise." I nodded, confused but steady under her grip. Dad handed me a gin and tonic without asking, his nod brief. "Kayla." Cody glanced up, casual as ever. "Hey sis, been a while." Amber turned her smile, practiced, her eyes scanning me like she was sizing up competition. Something about her posture, confident, almost smug, set me on edge. I sat in a corner chair away from the main group, feeling like a guest in my own childhood home. Small talk started, all about Cody's startup success and Amber's candle business. No one asked about my life in Miami, my recent award for a tourism campaign, or even how I was doing. Grandma Mary tried starting to ask about a project I'd mentioned, but Amber cut in with a story about her latest sale, and the room's attention swung back to her. Dinner was called at 7 sharp, just like always. We moved to the dining room, the table set with Mom's heirloom china and silver candlesticks. I headed for my usual seat next to Dad, but Amber was already there, settling in with a small smile. "Oh, Kayla, I hope it's okay," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Your mom thought I should sit here tonight." Mom appeared at my side. "Kayla, take the seat by Grandma." It was a clear step down a spot usually for distant cousins or guests. I looked to Dad, hoping for a word, but he was busy pouring wine, avoiding my eyes. Grandma Mary squeezed my hand under the table as I sat, her touch the only thing keeping me grounded. Something big was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Dinner started at 7 sharp. Mom led us to the dining room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor of our rye house. The table gleamed with heirloom china, silver candlesticks casting shadows, and a centerpiece of white roses that screamed her perfectionism. I moved toward my usual seat next to Dad, but Amber was already there, smoothing her dress with a smug smile. "Kayla, I hope you don't mind," she said, her voice syrupy. "Angela thought I should sit here for the big news." I froze, her words sinking in. Mom touched my arm. "Take the chair by Grandma Kayla." It was the guest spot reserved for cousins or neighbors, not family. I glanced at Dad, but he was pouring wine, eyes fixed on the glass. Grandma Mary caught my gaze, her hand brushing mine as I sat, a silent anchor in the storm brewing inside me. Dad raised his glass for a toast. "To family and success," he said, looking at Cody and Amber. My brother stood grinning wide. "Amber and I have an announcement. I've been promoted to VP at my startup. We're also closing on a house in Mamaroneck just down the road." The room erupted in cheers. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. A vice president and a new home so close she gushed. Dad clapped Cody's shoulder. "That's my boy, building a legacy." Amber beamed, her hand resting on Cody's arm like she'd orchestrated it all. I forced a smile, offering a quiet congrats, but no one acknowledged it. The conversation swirled around Cody's promotion, their house plans, and the best schools in Westchester for their future kids. My life in Miami, my own promotions, my condo didn't exist to them. I tried to join in, mentioning a memory of Cody and me exploring the Rye Beach as kids, hoping to connect. Cody brushed it off. "Yeah, that was ages ago. Anyway, we're thinking of a modern nursery design." Amber nodded, adding, "We've already got a realtor scouting bigger lots." Mom turned to me, her smile tight. "Kayla, maybe you could learn from their ambition. Miami's fun, but it's not serious." The jab landed hard, my fork pausing midair. I set it down, trying to stay calm. "I just won an award for a tourism campaign," I said. Amber's laugh was sharp. "Oh, that's cute. Posting beach ads must be so freeing." Dad chuckled and Cody stayed silent, staring at his plate. The air grew heavier. I brought up Cody's startup, hoping to clear the tension. That promotion must feel good after your big pitch. I remember sharing a similar idea on LinkedIn last year. Cody's face tightened, but Amber jumped in. Ideas are everywhere, Kayla. Cody's the one who made it happen. Mom nodded. Exactly. He's focused on real results, not just dreams. My chest burned. They were rewriting history, erasing my contribution to his success. I pushed back. It was my concept he used. You all celebrated it on Facebook without mentioning me. Dad sighed, exasperated. Kayla, don't make this about you. This is Cody's night. Amber leaned forward, her voice low and pointed. If you're so upset, maybe you'd be more comfortable eating elsewhere. Your place isn't really here, is it? The words echoed Mom's earlier cruelty, sharper now. I looked to Cody, waiting for him to say something, anything. He just fidgeted with his napkin, avoiding my eyes. Mom stood, her face flushed. Kayla, enough. You've been gone for years chasing your Miami life. You don't get to come back and ruin this celebration. Her voice rose final. You don't belong here anymore. Your place is under the floor, not at this table. The room went silent. My throat tightened, the weight of her words crushing. Dad stared at his wine. Cody looked down. Amber's lips curved slightly, triumphant. Only Grandma Mary's hand tightened on mine, her eyes fierce but steady. I placed my napkin down my hands, shaking, and stood. I think I'm done here, I said, voice low. I headed for the stairs, ready to grab my suitcase and book the next flight to Miami. The hope I'd carried into this house was gone, replaced by a raw ache. I was halfway to the foyer when Grandma's voice stopped me. Kayla, wait. She stood at the dining room door, her cane firm against the floor. Come back. There's something you need to hear. I followed Grandma back to the dining room. Her grip on my arm was steady, her cane tapping with purpose against the hardwood floor of our rye house. The air felt thick, the silence from moments ago replaced by a tense hum. Mom sat rigid, her lips pressed tight. Dad's face was a mask of irritation, his wineglass untouched. Cody fidgeted, avoiding my eyes, while Amber's gaze was cold, calculating. Aunt Andrea leaned forward in her chair, watching with quiet intensity. Grandma Mary didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding despite her age. Kayla's not leaving? She said, her voice cutting through the room. What I'm about to say concerns her most. Mom's eyes narrowed. Mary, she was disrupting our celebration. Grandma raised a hand, silencing her. Enough, Angela. I've watched this family push Kayla aside for too long, and tonight it ends. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope, placing it on the table with deliberate care. Before your grandfather passed, he and I made arrangements for this house, arrangements we kept private until now. Dad leaned forward, his brow creasing. What are you talking about, Mom? Grandma's eyes locked on me. Kayla, this house, its deed, its legacy was left to you. The room exploded. Mom's voice rose sharp. That's absurd. This is our home. Dad slammed his glass down. There's got to be a mistake. Dad would never. Cody cut in, his tone defensive. Why would Grandpa do that? Kayla's barely here. Amber's smile vanished, her voice icy. This is ridiculous. She can't just take our family's house. I sat frozen, my heart pounding, trying to process Grandma's words. Grandma, what do you mean? Why me? I asked, my voice barely steady. She handed me the envelope, her expression soft but firm. Your grandfather saw your strength, Kayla. Your independence, your drive. He wanted this house to be yours, to give you the power to stand tall in this family. Aunt Andrea stood, her chair scraping the floor. It's true, she said, pulling a folder from her bag. I was there when Dad revised the will. He named Kayla as the sole beneficiary of the trust holding this property effective 5 years ago when he passed. I've got the notarized documents right here. She spread them across the table, legal papers, signatures, seals. Dad snatched one up, scanning it with growing disbelief. "This can't be legal," he muttered. Grandma's voice was calm but unyielding. "It's ironclad, Patrick. Reviewed by 2 attorneys. I've been the trustee managing it until Kayla turned 30, but after tonight, after hearing you tell her she doesn't belong in her own home, I couldn't wait any longer." Mom's face flushed red. "You kept this from us." "For years." Grandma nodded. "Your father wanted Kayla to build her life first, to know her worth without this house defining her. He knew you'd fight it, Angela." I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. This house, the colonial by the Sound where I'd chased crabs and dreamed up campaigns, was mine. The place where I'd felt so small was now my power. Cody's voice broke through sharp. "So what now? Kayla kicks us out, sells the house to spite us." All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of the moment. "I need time to think," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is too much." Mom stood, her napkin falling to the floor. "This is manipulation. We'll contest this." Grandma's eyes didn't waver. "You can try, Angela, but you'll lose. The trust is airtight." I pushed my chair back, needing air. "I'm not here to destroy anything," I said, looking at them all, "but I'm done being invisible. If you want to stay in this house, things change. First, you respect me, my career, my choices. Second, Grandma stays in the guest cottage as long as she wants, no questions. Third, this is my home now, and I decide who's welcome." Dad's jaw tightened. "You're dictating terms to your own parents." I met his gaze. "Yes, for once my voice matters." Amber scoffed. "You're just bitter, Kayla. You've always been jealous of Cody's success." I turned to her. "I'm not jealous. I'm tired of being erased. You want to talk about success? I built my life in Miami from nothing. This house is mine, and I won't let you push me out again." Cody finally spoke, his voice low. "Kayla, be reasonable. We're a family." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Family." You sat there while they told me my place was under the floor. Mom's voice was cold. "If you think you can waltz in and take everything, you're wrong. We'll fight this." Aunt Andrea shook her head. "Angela, you're fighting a losing battle. Dad's will is clear." Grandma placed a hand on my shoulder. "Kayla, your grandfather believed in you. He knew you'd know what to do with this." I looked around, Mom's anger, Dad's denial, Cody's discomfort, Amber's calculation. They weren't going to change. I stood, my resolve hardening. "I'm going outside," I said. "Grandma, come with me." We left the dining room, their voices rising behind us, but I didn't look back. The night air waited, and with it a choice I wasn't ready to make. The porch swing creaked as Grandma Mary and I sat outside, the cool spring night wrapping around us. The Long Island Sound whispered in the distance, a faint reminder of the Rye house that was now mine. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice low, still reeling from the bombshell. Grandma's eyes softened. "Your grandfather wanted you to find your own path first, Kayla, to know your strength, without this house weighing you down. He saw you always did." Her words stirred something deep, a mix of gratitude and resolve. Inside, raised voices spilled from the dining room, my family arguing over a legacy they thought was theirs. I knew what had to come next. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, glinting off Mom's spotless counters. The tension was palpable as I walked in, coffee mug in hand. Dad sat at the table, his face set in a scowl, papers from last night's reveal scattered before him. Mom was scrubbing a pan, her movements sharp. Cody and Amber sat close, whispering, their eyes darting to me. Aunt Andrea sipped tea, watching quietly. Grandma joined us, her cane steady as she nodded my way. I took a breath, setting my mug down. We need to talk about what happens now. Dad didn't look up. There's nothing to discuss. We're contesting this will. His voice was clipped, certain. Mom turned, her eyes blazing. Kayla, you can't seriously think you'll take this house. You live in Miami chasing your little campaigns. Cody and Amber are building a life here. I stayed calm, my voice even. This isn't about taking anything. It's about what's fair. Grandpa left this to me, and I'm not backing down. Cody shifted uncomfortably. Kayla, don't do this. We're family. You can't just kick us out. Amber's tone was sharp. You're doing this out of spite, aren't you? You've always resented Cody's success. I met her gaze. Spite you all erased me, my ideas, my place here. You celebrated Cody's promotion built on my work and told me I belong under the floor. Mom's face tightened. You chose to leave Kayla. You don't get to dictate terms now. I stood taller. I do, because this house is mine. If you want to stay, you respect me, my career, my choices. Grandma stays in the cottage, no questions. And this house is a place where I'm not invisible. Dad laughed bitter. You're delusional if you think we'll agree to that. Aunt Andrea set her tea down. Patrick, Angela. The will is clear. Contesting it will cost you thousands, $50,000 or more in legal fees, and you'll lose. Grandma nodded. Your father made sure of that. Cody's voice was quiet. So you'll sell the house? Uproot us all, I shook my head. I'm not selling, but I'm done begging for a place here. You can stay until you find somewhere else, but I set the rules now. Mom's eyes flashed. We raised you, Kayla. This is betrayal. I met her stare. Betrayal was telling me I don't belong in my own home. The room fell silent. Cody looked away, Amber's face hardened, and my parents exchanged a glance, their resolve cracking but not breaking. I knew then there'd be no compromise. I'm done, I said, turning to leave. Grandma followed, her hand on my arm. You did right, she whispered. I booked a flight back to Miami that afternoon, leaving the house behind, but carrying its weight. A year later, I stood on that same porch, the Rye house quiet under a crisp autumn sky. I'd kept it, renting it out to a young family for $10,000 a month, enough to cover taxes and my Miami condo. My career had soared, new campaigns for international resorts, a promotion to creative director, a salary pushing $150,000. My life was full, surrounded by friends who saw me for me. Grandma Mary stayed in the cottage visiting me in Miami when she could, her stories keeping me grounded. My family. They'd moved out within months, unable to accept my terms. Dad and Mom rented a condo in White Plains, shelling out $5,000 monthly, straining their retirement savings. Cody and Amber bought a smaller house in Mamaroneck, taking on a hefty mortgage, $300,000 down, with high interest rates eating at their budget. Their marriage frayed under the stress. Last I heard, they were in counseling, maybe heading for divorce. They tried contesting the will, spending $20,000 on lawyers, but Aunt Andrea was right, they lost. The house was mine legally and undeniably. I didn't want revenge, just respect, but they couldn't give it. Standing on that porch, I realized belonging isn't about blood. It's about standing in your truth. If you've ever had to fight for your place, know this: your worth isn't tied to those who can't see it. Claim your space, even if it means walking away. That's what I did, and I've never felt freer.